Today we're going to be comparing Spider-Man 3, the junior novel by Jasmine Jones, to the theatrical release of the movie. Also, before we get started, I would like to thank the person who suggested I go over this novel. So, let's compare Spider-Man 3, the junior novel, to the theatrical release of the movie. Chapter 1 starts off relatively the same as the movie. New York loves Spider-Man. Peter's proud of what he's accomplished. Though when we get to the Uncle Ben would be proud line, the book elaborates as to what Peter's feeling during this moment. So at this moment, it tells us that the memory of Uncle Ben's murder was still fresh in Peter's mind. Peter felt he had brought the killer to justice, but he still missed his Uncle Ben every day. But Peter knew that his uncle would have liked the fact that he accepted his responsibility as Spider-Man. Peter's also at the top of his class, like in the movie. Though Gwen Stacy is not mentioned at this point in time, but she will be later. We move on to Mary Jane's show. The book describes Mary Jane as having the lead role, and there being a life-size poster of her. One thing I can say is there was not a life-size poster of Mary Jane in Spider-Man 3, at least not to my knowledge. What we saw in the movie was at least a billboard for the show titled Manhattan Memories. As far as her being the lead role in the show and the movie, she probably was, but the billboard seems to say otherwise. When we look at the actual cast list on the billboard, Mary Jane is the third person listed. If she was the lead, wouldn't she be the first person? With casting, the lead role is usually listed as the first person. The other exceptions I can think of would either be alphabetical casting or order of appearance. What I can point out is that the cast on the billboard in the movie is in no way alphabetical. And it's not in order of appearance because Mary Jane is the first person on stage to sing the opening number. I feel like, despite all this, she probably is the lead, because after the performance, the papers are writing about her specifically, and she gets replaced because of the bad reviews. I don't think there would be so much attention towards her if she wasn't the lead. The book adds a detail that was left out of the movie, describing Peter's life as perfect, except for the fact that his friendship with Harry Osborn had been ruined due to the fact that Harry thinks Peter killed his father. Now, unlike the movie, it's mentioned that Peter attempted to talk to Harry at Oscorp, but Harry told his secretary to never let Peter through. When we get to Mary Jane's performance, the book does describe the applause as being not very loud, as Mary Jane would say in the movie. Unlike the movie, at the end of the show, Peter gives Mary Jane a standing ovation. After the show, Peter would attempt to talk to Harry, and Harry does consider it. He's feeling those emotions. It says, Harry felt a pull at his heart. Peter was his closest friend. Perhaps he should hear him out. This is where things get a little interesting. The book says that a reflection of Norman Osborn's face appears in the window. Just to Harry, though, meaning this is happening in Harry's mind. This reflection of Norman continuously tells Harry, don't weaken. To which, after Peter has been begging Harry to listen to him and hear the truth, Harry eventually tells his driver to drive away, saying nothing to Peter. When Peter meets with Mary Jane after the show, the scene flows basically the same as the movie, except for one detail. During the same scene, an older gentleman is said to walk past Mary Jane and compliment her performance. Mary Jane is excited to have been complimented by this man, as she goes on to say that he won a Tony Award. It's unclear whether or not this was meant to be a celebrity cameo or some sort of joke. I couldn't really find much information other than the fact that the official novel by Peter David mentions it as well. Peter and Mary Jane are together on the web, watching the sky, just like in the movie. The scene is the same. Mary Jane says, I'd like to sing on stage for the rest of my life, with you in the front row. Peter says, I'll be there. Eventually, the symbiote falls from a meteorite in the sky and attaches itself to Peter's bike, without Peter and Mary Jane knowing. Chapter 2 is when we meet Flint Marko. A small difference is that rather than changing his clothes in his apartment, Flint grabs a striped sweater and pants off a nearby laundry line to change out of his prison uniform. The scene follows as usual, with Flint entering the apartment, tucking the letters under his daughter's pillow, and then entering the kitchen, though this time, instead of going to get food like in the movie, Flint puts his hand into a cookie jar, grabbing a handful of cash and putting it into his pocket. Like in the movie, Flint's wife, Emma, turns on the lights. Finding Flint in the apartment, Flint says he's just here to see his daughter. The dialogue between Flint and Emma takes a bit more of a heated exchange in the novel versus the movie. Emma tells Flint to get out of here and that he's guilty as sin. Flint's dialogue is similar to the movie, saying things like, "I want to do good. That's the truth." Eventually, Penny, their daughter, steps out, handing Flint the locket. Emma repeatedly tells Flint to leave. We get some foreshadowing dialogue from Emma before Flint leaves, as she tells him, "You'll end up where you belong, crawling on the ground as a useless grain of sand." Flint's last words to his family are, "Pray for me." In the novel, Emma doesn't bring up the fact that Flint may have killed someone, who would later turn out to be Uncle Ben. Peter is now at Aunt May's house, as he tells her that he plans to marry Mary Jane. Aunt May gives Peter the whole, "you have to be ready for marriage" speech. Aunt May straight up tells Peter that he needs a steady job, and the book even says that Peter himself knows this as well. Aunt May gives Peter her blessing and the ring Uncle Ben gave her. Chapter 3. Following this, the book brings us to the lair hidden within the Osborn mansion. As Harry is preparing to transform into the new goblin, the book says that Norman Osborn often spoke to his son through reflections and mirrors, and he wanted Harry to kill Spider-Man. After Harry is transformed, he feels powerful and ready to go after Peter, who he believes killed his father. Next is a scene that was not in the movie. There's a moment where Peter goes to the Daily Bugle to ask Mr. Jameson about getting a staff job. He wants to have a stable job in order to propose to Mary Jane. However, Jameson had been in a bad mood because paper sales were down, and Eddie Brock was there talking to Jameson. Peter does try to talk to Jameson, but Jameson yells at him, saying, "You're not the only photographer in town." Peter decides he'll try again some other time. We move to the fight between Peter and the new goblin. When Peter is attacked by Harry as the new goblin, the novel says that Peter believes it's the Green Goblin at first, though Peter knows it's not possible and decides that it must be someone else using the same gear, hence the name the New Goblin. Harry's face is revealed to Peter. They have a similar exchange, with Harry saying, "Face it, Pete, it had come to this." Peter tells Harry that he didn't kill his father, but Harry refuses to listen, and he tells Peter to shut up. Their fight is very quick in the novel. Peter ends the fight by knocking Harry out with a web line. Peter takes Harry to a hospital. We move to Flint Marko running away from the police. The difference here is that the novel makes no mention that Flint Marko was involved in Uncle Ben's murder prior to this scene like the movie. The scene in the novel goes from him running away from the police to him falling into that test facility, to him transforming into Sandman, and then him waking up and learning how to control his abilities, and then leaving that facility. Whereas in the movie, before Sandman wakes up, there's a scene with Peter and Harry in the hospital, though the novel just skips that and is basically like, Harry got amnesia. But we'll get there, because we're going in order. The morning after the fight with Harry, Peter notices black goo on his shoe, which is the symbiote. Peter looks around for a rag to wipe it off, but it disappears. This has been a consistent detail with Spider-Man 3 books, and I feel like I can make a good assumption that it was going to be a part of the movie. Following this, we get scenes that follow the movie pretty closely. Mary Jane enters Peter's apartment to discuss the bad review she got after the show. Peter doesn't seem to be able to understand how she's feeling. We move to Spider-Man saving Gwen from falling from the building. I will note here that this is kind of an interesting detail about Gwen that wasn't in the movies. It says that while she was up here in this building modeling, she wished she was back in chemistry class, comparing notes with her friend Peter Parker. After this, though, it basically follows the same. Spider-Man saves Gwen. Eddie Brock takes the pictures. Eddie introduces himself to Spider-Man as the new photographer for Spider-Man. So we move to Chapter 4. Eddie brings Mr. Jameson the picture of Spider-Man saving Gwen. Peter also has a picture. Jameson decides to go with Eddie's photo. A staff job is available, and both Peter and Eddie want it. So Mr. Jameson says whoever can bring him a picture of Spider-Man with his hand in the cookie jar, meaning whoever can bring him a photo of Spider-Man committing a crime or doing something wrong will get the job. Moving to the next scene. Remember when I said the novel basically just says Harry got amnesia? This is here. When Peter and Harry return to Harry's house, Bernard welcomes Harry home. The novel even says that Harry barely remembers anything about Bernard as well. I figure they probably skipped over the hospital scene and just quickly described Harry's condition to save time with regards to the novel. Other than that, the scene basically plays out the same as the movie. Harry can't really remember anything. Harry kind of jokes around. He's like, "It looks like I'm not hurting for money." And Peter says back, "Harry, you're loaded," which is kind of a wild thing to say to somebody whose dad died. And that's the reason why he has the money. Peter tosses the ball to Harry, almost knocks over a vase, but it says Harry might not remember the new goblin, but he could still move like him. And Peter just kind of has to play this off, like, guess you still got the moves. Right after Mary Jane is fired from the show, pretty much the same as the movie. She walks in there, another actress is performing her part. The director asks, "Didn't anybody call her?" Mary Jane's wondering, "One critic?" The producer says, "All the papers." And they say, "If you like, we could say you became ill." Mary Jane didn't even reply, and she walks out of there. And so we move to the Key to the City scene. The Key to the City scene has a few alterations. The novel points out that Peter is so excited about receiving the key to the city that he doesn't even think to ask why Mary Jane isn't getting ready for the show that day. Mary Jane does think about telling him that she was fired, but just tells him to give them a good show, like in the movie. Peter says she shouldn't be worrying about that bad review because they'll be laughing about it at the restaurant later. Right after Sandman is walking down the street, a couple of police officers spot him. He hides in a truck full of sand. The police officer goes to look in the truck, but there's nobody there. It's just a whole bunch of sand. Sandman shoots his hand right out of the truck, launches the cop into the air. He falls against a car. Sandman rises out of the truck. Everybody's shocked. The police officers fire at him. Going back to the Key to the City scene, Mary Jane tells Harry what happened, that she got fired. The novel points out that Mary Jane knew that Harry also knew that Peter was Spider-Man, but it doesn't really elaborate as to how or why she knew that Harry knew Peter was Spider-Man. So the novel says Mary Jane is going to keep Peter's identity a secret from now on. Chapter 5. When we get to Chapter 5, during the kiss between Peter and Gwen, the novel seems to say that it was Gwen's idea to kiss Spider-Man, rather than the other way around in the movie. Here it says, once he was face to face with her, he paused, still upside down. It goes on to say, Gwen didn't know what made her do it, but when she saw Spider-Man so close, she reached out and pulled up his mask. Not all the way, just enough to reveal his mouth. I just want to thank him for saving me, Gwen thought, but in her heart she knew that it was more than that. Spider-Man was amazing, he was brave, he was unique. Gwen passed Spider-Man the key, but before he could thank her, Gwen pressed her lips against his. Rather than in the movie, Peter is like, "Go ahead, lay one on me." And so obviously Mary Jane sees it, and she's upset by it because that was like the upside-down kiss that they did in the first movie. Moving forward past the fight with Sandman, after the Key to the City celebration, after the first fight with Sandman, the Daily Bugle runs an article titled, "Sandman, Son of a Beach. Even Spider-Man can't stop him," with a note from the editor-in-chief saying, "Bugle call, give back the key." The article barely mentions Spider-Man saving the guards, as the novel says. Peter sees the article and is upset by it. Chapter 6. The scene where Peter plans to propose to Mary Jane at the restaurant is basically the same as the movie. Peter is blissfully happy about how things are going for him as Spider-Man, to where he doesn't understand how Mary Jane is feeling, to which she becomes even more upset with him. Mary Jane is unable to tell Peter that she was fired from her job as a Broadway performer, and to make things worse, Gwen Stacy shows up and talks to them about her kiss with Spider-Man. The novel gives us a line from Mary Jane before she leaves the restaurant saying, "I guess I thought you were going to..." It goes on to say that she wanted Peter to apologize for hurting her feelings by kissing Gwen, especially since it was similar to the upside-down kiss that they had in the first movie. Eventually, Mary Jane says, just like in the movie, "I don't feel very well, I have to go." Peter gets a phone call the next day from the police department. The detective in the novel specifically tells him that they have new information regarding Uncle Ben's homicide. Unlike the movie, where he just says, "Captain Stacy would like you to come down to the station and speak with him." The reveal of Flint Marko as Uncle Ben's killer plays out the same as the movie. Peter is upset that they chased down the wrong man, and is now intending to get revenge against Flint Marko. Moving on to Chapter 7. This chapter starts with a scene that was not in the movie, but it has been mentioned in novels like this, as well as the official novel by Peter David. This is when Flint Marko goes to talk to Dr. Wallace, who is believed to be able to cure Penny's illness. There's actually been found footage of this scene as well. So what happens in this scene? Basically, Flint goes to a medical research facility. He's been sending letters from prison to Dr. Wallace about a cure for Penny's illness. Flint eventually finds him here at the facility. Dr. Wallace says that there wasn't enough funding to finish the research. Flint then gives Wallace stacks of money, which he stole from the truck earlier. Dr. Wallace tries to be rational with Flint and tells him that even with the money, it'd be unlikely to find a cure in time to save Penny. So Flint threatens him, and Wallace assures Flint that he'll find a cure. What follows is Mary Jane going over to Peter's apartment to tell him that she heard the news about Uncle Ben's real killer. However, just like in the movie, Peter is dismissive of Mary Jane. Their conversation is basically the same as the movie. Mary Jane says, "If I can help you in some way, I'm here to be here." And she says, "I just want..." However, Peter cuts her off and says, "Thank you for coming." And Mary Jane says, "We all need help sometimes, Peter." Chapter 8. Next is when Peter first wakes up with the symbiote attached to him. When Spider-Man wakes up with the symbiote attached to him for the first time, his reactions are expected. He feels stronger, and he later hears something on the police scanner about the subway's money train, and Peter knew it had something to do with Sandman. The novel moves directly to the subway underground. No interaction with Eddie Brock is mentioned before any of this. We get some more aggressive dialogue from Spider-Man during the fight with Sandman. As a matter of fact, he doesn't say anything about Uncle Ben to him. The novel says that's what he was thinking, but it seems that Spider-Man is focused on revenge at this point. The two of them are face to face. Spider-Man says to Sandman, "I'm gonna beat you up real bad. And then I'm gonna do it again. And then I'm gonna take what's left of you back to prison." Eventually, Spider-Man ends the fight similar to the movie, by shooting a web at a pipe and yanking it so that the water would drown Sandman into the sewer drain. The novel states that Spider-Man didn't feel bad about it, not even a little bit. Here we arrive at the rent scene from Spider-Man 3. This takes a bit of a different direction. Mr. Ditkovich asks Peter for rent. Peter replies saying, "Maybe I would consider paying the rent if you fixed anything in the building, like the door. The broken door to my apartment, which is, at this very moment, unlocked." Peter is so angry at this moment that he actually rips the door off its hinges. He walks back into his apartment. He sees himself in the mirror, but he barely recognizes what he sees. His eyes were huge, his teeth bared like a wild animal, as the novel describes. It's the suit, Peter realizes, and he knows it's affecting him. He knows it's making him stronger, but he feels different. The novel says he couldn't wear the suit anymore, no matter how strong it made him. It says a Spider-Man who is out of control and unpredictable could do far more harm than good, like what he did to Sandman that afternoon. He thinks about getting rid of the suit, but he thinks that's too dangerous because somebody would find it, which is kind of ironic of him thinking about somebody finding it because later on he goes on to rip off the suit in a church, and then the suit attaches itself to probably the worst person it could attach itself to in this movie. He also thinks about destroying it, but he doesn't like the idea of that, so he just decides to put it in the trunk in his room. He decides he'll keep it, but he just won't wear it again. After this is the scene where Mary Jane calls Harry. Mary Jane called him and told him about her job at the jazz club. Harry says they should celebrate and invites her over. Right after the phone call, Norman appears in the mirror to remind Harry that he's taken his eye off the ball. This is when Harry now remembers everything, after having amnesia. The difference here is that in the novel, Harry gets his memory back before Mary Jane even arrives at his house, when in the movie, Harry gets his memory back after she leaves. So, how does Harry handle this in the novel? So, Norman is asking Harry, "Why haven't you killed Peter?" Ultimately, though, Harry decides that Peter is his friend, and he won't do that, saying to Norman, "I won't listen to you anymore. Let me be." Following this, Peter takes the symbiote to Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors keeps the sample of it, and tells Peter he'll get back to him as soon as he can. In the movie, the first thing Peter did after waking up with the symbiote attached to him was swing around for like a little bit and then take it to Dr. Connors. Here in the novel, he waits a little while, like after the fight with Sandman, in the subway, and the rent scene. Back at Harry's place, when Mary Jane is over for lunch, the scene is pretty much the same, except the difference is that Harry has his memory back at this point, but he's refused to give in to what the voices of Norman are telling him. When we get to the kiss between Harry and Mary Jane, the novel tells a different perspective, whereas it seems as though Harry non-consensually kissed Mary Jane. But in the movie, it was clearly a mutual kiss. The novel says he pressed his lips against hers. Mary Jane pulled away, torn, like it was Harry's own doing. So we get some interesting explanations and dialogue from this novel during this moment. It tells us that Harry remembers he's jealous of Peter and Mary Jane's relationship. Harry says, "You're thinking about Peter, aren't you?" Mary Jane replies, "I guess I am," adding that she had to go. At this point, Harry is feeling those emotions of jealousy. Harry starts hearing those voices again. He even comes to a moment of helplessness, as he doesn't want Mary Jane to leave him alone with the voices that tell him to hurt Peter and her. Though it's too late, as she leaves, and Norman is now in control of Harry. What follows is the breakup scene with Peter and Mary Jane. Unlike the movie, there's no scene with Harry threatening Mary Jane to break up with Peter before this. Mary Jane had called Peter to meet her in the park. Peter brings her flowers. A small difference is that this conversation is happening on a bench rather than both of them talking to each other face to face on the bridge. It's a small detail. When Mary Jane tells Peter that there's someone else, the novel says that Peter is not going to give up this relationship that easily. And so he actually gets down on one knee to propose to her, rather than just showing her the ring in the movie. Mary Jane was holding back tears from how painful this was for her to do, because obviously she was forced to, as the movie showed, but this book doesn't tell us that. Mary Jane tells Peter, "Just leave me alone," as she walks away crying, leaving him in the park with his flowers. It is not mentioned that Harry was at the park in the novel, like he was in the movie. After this, we actually don't get a scene with Peter and Harry at the cafe, where Harry is like, "I'm the other guy," and later uses his goblin powers to vanish before Peter's eyes. Instead, Peter sits in his room, wondering how things got to this point. As the novel says, he knew he was in the wrong for kissing Gwen. He knew that he hadn't been there for Mary Jane when she was sad. He knew that he hadn't seemed grateful when Mary Jane had come over to comfort him about Uncle Ben. But he didn't believe any of those were good reasons to break up with him because people had arguments all the time. He wanted to help Mary Jane, but didn't know how. He wanted to make this horrible feeling go away, which is where he turns to the symbiote. Peter thinks to himself, "I'll wear it, just until I feel better." After this, the next scene is where Peter exposes Eddie for faking a photo at the Daily Bugle of Spider-Man. It's basically the same as the movie. Peter arrives at the Daily Bugle after Eddie has been awarded the staff job. However, Peter knows the picture Eddie used was fake and confronts him about it. Eddie tells Peter to give a guy a break, but Peter is not having it. Peter hands Robbie the file, telling him, "Show this to your editor. Tell him to check his sources." Peter leaves, knowing Eddie would be fired. Unfortunately, no mention of a dance montage afterwards. What happens after Eddie Brock being fired is Peter going to Harry's house to ask him if he knew what was going on with Mary Jane. This is not confrontational, this is simply just him going there to talk to him, as the novel describes. When Peter arrives, Harry says to Peter, "What took you so long?" Peter is confused by this, as Harry continues to say, "I loved her, Pete. But you took her from me. You killed my father, and now you're going to pay." The new goblin lunges at Peter. They have their fight. Harry is now on the ground in the goblin lair, asking Peter, "You gonna kill me like you killed my father?" Peter shouts at him, "Your father was a monster, and you know it. He tried to stab me in the back. I jumped out of the way." Leaning forward, Peter growled, "He never loved you." Harry yells, "My father loved me." Though Peter says, "He despised you. You were an embarrassment." The novel says that Peter could hardly believe the words he was saying, that he was trying to hurt his friend. Harry attempts to throw a pumpkin bomb at Peter, like in the movie, but Peter throws it back. An interesting moment that was different from the movie is that instead of carelessly walking away from the explosion, Peter actually tries to help Harry. Peter tells Harry, "Let me help you. You have to go to the hospital." But Harry yells at Peter to leave. After this, Dr. Connors explains to Peter what the symbiote is, and that it can manipulate its host, just like in the movie. I think an important thing to note here is that the novel points out that Peter actually feels bad about the things he's done while he's worn the symbiote, like throwing the bomb at Harry, drowning Sandman, shoving Eddie into the wall, compared to the movie when he was on the phone with Dr. Connors when he was just kinda careless and didn't really seem to care that much about what he was doing at this point in the story. The following scene is Peter telling Aunt May that Spider-Man killed Flint Marko, though it's more of a we're in the middle of a scene kind of thing. with the scene opening with Aunt May asking, "How did he die?" Then Peter says, "Spider-Man did it." Then the rest of the scene plays out the same. Aunt May says, "Your uncle wouldn't want you living with revenge in your heart. It's like a poison. It can take you over. Before you know it, it turns us into something ugly." Peter knew his aunt was right, but he was still happy that Sandman was gone. Now, if this were the movie, the scene with Peter telling Aunt May about what happened to Sandman, Flint Marko, that would have happened after Peter takes off the symbiote for a little bit. What follows is the jazz club scene. This scene would have happened after Peter exposed Eddie's fake picture. Dr. Connors tells him about the symbiote and everything. He does the whole dance montage, and then in the movie we would get to the jazz club scene. So, Peter takes Gwen Stacy on a date to a jazz club. I think there's some irony going on here with the novel's writing, because it says Peter thinks to himself, "I need to move on with my life from Mary Jane," but he straight up takes Gwen on a date where he knows Mary Jane works just to get revenge on Mary Jane. So he's saying he wants to move on from Mary Jane, but this is about Mary Jane. Maybe some dramatic and even verbal irony going on here, because the story is telling us basically the opposite of what Peter is thinking. So eventually, Peter interrupts Mary Jane's performance by playing the piano. He says, "I'd like to dedicate this song to a special lady out there. A very special lady," looking intentionally at Gwen. Peter and Gwen have their dance, though after the dance, Gwen pushes Peter away and says, "That was for her, wasn't it? That's why you brought me here." Gwen apologizes to Mary Jane and leaves. When Peter is asked to leave the jazz club, it's a lot more aggressive than the movie. The manager asks him to leave, but he refuses. Then the bouncer gets near him, but Peter flips him over onto his back. At this point, every guy in the club tried to take him down, but he was too strong. That was until Mary Jane tried to stop Peter. Without thinking, he grabbed her too. In the club, everything stopped after that. Mary Jane whispers, "What's happened to you?" Peter felt sick. "I don't know," he replied. "It's the suit," Mary Jane said. And Peter knew it was true. Peter getting rid of the symbiote follows the movie pretty closely, so I'll mention a few key things that add to the perspective of the story. Eddie Brock reacts to seeing Peter Parker as Spider-Man in the church. The novel describes him thinking, "Peter Parker is Spider-Man? The two people who ruined my life are really one?" The novel adds that ever since Peter exposed Eddie's fake photo, Eddie had been keeping an eye on Peter and following him around. The novel does mention that Eddie was praying for a way to get revenge on Peter when the symbiote fell upon him. Next is a scene that was not in the movie. This is Eddie after becoming Venom, sneaking through Peter's apartment. Eddie was able to get into Peter's apartment because the lock on the door didn't work. I guess that door will never be fixed, will it? Eddie considers killing Peter right then and there. However, he doesn't want to make things too easy. He wants to show Peter and everyone how powerful he is now. He wants to kill Spider-Man in public. Eddie sees a picture of Mary Jane in Peter's apartment. The novel says Eddie recognizes her as the waitress in the jazz club, the one Peter made himself a fool for. I feel like this is probably the symbiote piecing the memories together of Peter to Eddie. And yeah, Eddie could have been at the jazz club during that time, but it seems unlikely. Peter would have recognized him at some point because it's not like it was a big club where people could remain unnoticed. Also, they weren't there very long. So if Eddie watched them go in, he would have had a short amount of time to have entered and witnessed everything himself. The best explanation I can think of is that he watched it happen through a window. Really though, it's probably the symbiote sharing the memories. Moving on to Chapter 11, another scene that was not in the movie. Flint Marko looks up from the street to his daughter's room, hoping one day that a cure will be found for her illness. Flint Marko had checked back with Dr. Wallace, who he's counting on to find a cure for his daughter. Wallace assured him that he was working as fast as he could, but he still hadn't found a cure. Flint whispered, directed at Penny's room. I'm your father, watching you all the time. To which Eddie appears. Ah, the family. Do I know you? Flint asks. I'm the enemy of your enemy, says Eddie. Eddie explained that they both have Spider-Man in common. They both want to get rid of him. Flint says, I just want to tie him down somewhere. Keep him off my neck. Then follow me, Eddie says. There's no scene with Eddie in the cab, picking up Mary Jane and turning back to her like, so, where to? Like in the movie. It cuts to television showing a hostage situation. Sandman and Venom had captured Mary Jane, leaving the message, Spider-Man, stop us if you can. A news anchor stated, this is a suicide mission for Spider-Man. Peter remembered Mary Jane's words. We all need help sometimes. Back at Harry's house, he was still healing from his injuries. He had hired a private doctor to help him. The doctor said he would heal, but his face may never look completely normal. Peter arrives at Harry's house. Harry sarcastically says, Why don't you come in, Pete? I guess you will. You always manage to do whatever you want. Peter tells Harry that they have MJ. He can't take them both. Not by himself. I need your help, Harry, Peter begged. Harry thinks to himself, what's the point in helping MJ if she'll just go running back to Peter? Harry tells Peter, if you want to save MJ, you're going to have to do it yourself, and he tells Peter to get out. Interestingly enough, after this, the novel gives a moment of Harry contemplating between helping Peter or joining Sandman and Venom. Surprisingly, he doesn't do either. Harry does not appear again in this novel. The last mention of Harry in this novel is, but Harry couldn't make himself move. He didn't know what to do. He just didn't know. Which raises a few questions, because he doesn't appear at the final battle. There's not even a moment of Bernard telling him the truth about Norman, like in the movie. And I'm wondering, was the plan for Harry to still be alive? I don't think he does die. At least not in this version. I'm really interested to hear what you all think about this decision. So let's move on to the next scene. We're now at the final battle, where it will be just Spider-Man against Sandman and Venom. The first noticeable difference in the novel is that Gwen is at the scene. This is after Eddie gives Peter the whole, I'm thinking humiliation speech. Gwen shouts through a bullhorn to Eddie to come to his senses, but he doesn't listen. Spider-Man manages to evade Sandman so that he can fight Venom one-on-one. Spider-Man tries to get Eddie out of the suit. The novel explains that Eddie wants to keep the suit and that Spider-Man must be jealous of the power Eddie has. Spider-Man grabs a pipe to defend himself and accidentally ends up stabbing Venom in the stomach. The book seems to say that Eddie Brock survived this attack, which is kind of surprising. It says Eddie gasped for breath, looking down at the pipe in surprise. Peter webs a bunch of metal pipes held by a crane to which they would make noise that weakened the symbiote, similar to when Peter was getting rid of it in the bell tower. According to the novel, this didn't destroy the symbiote. It just sent it slithering away in all directions. Once again, it's not really clear whether or not Eddie survived this. What I will note is that there's no forgiveness scene between Spider-Man and Sandman after all this. I guess Sandman just kind of dipped from the scene. The book ends with the very last scene of the movie, with Peter and Mary Jane sharing a dance together in the jazz club. Peter mouths the words to Mary Jane, "Dance?" as a question. Peter says to her, "We have a lot to talk about." Mary Jane puts her finger to his lips, saying, "Let's not talk about the relationship. Just shut up and dance." So he did. Alright, that's going to do it for comparing Spider-Man 3, the junior novel, to the theatrical release of the movie. Let me know what you thought about this novel. Was there anything that you liked or didn't like? Anything that you thought should have been left in the movie? Also, let me know if you've read this yourself. As far as what I think, what I do know is that most of these novels and books that we go over on this channel are made from an earlier version of the script, which is why they will be different from the theatrical release. But I think it's refreshing to see some of those things. As big of a fan as I am of these movies, I like to see what could have been, you know? Seeing things that didn't make it to the movie, it's kind of like discovering buried treasure. So, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. And, with that being said, I'll see you next upload.